Hello, T1D community. What's happening? This is Sam here with Game Plan T1D. I wanted to let everyone know that we're coming up on our 10th episode. It's been recorded and we're releasing it a week from today. That being said, it's a good time to pause and reflect on our progress and seek out feedback from the MVPs, the true T1D All-Stars, our listeners. That's right. If you're listening to this podcast and you're enjoying our content, or perhaps you think it's garbage, either way, we want to know. Shoot me an email at sam@gameplant1d.com. You can send us a message through our website as well, or hit us up on social media at GamePlan T1D. Please, don't be shy. We won't be offended. We want to make sure we're serving you guys, the T1D community, to the best of our ability. With that being said, on today's episode, we're coming to you with another story of inspiration and success in the face of adversity. Please enjoy my conversation with track and field phenom, Kate Hall. Welcome to the Game Plan T1D Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Benger. On this podcast, we explore the lives of athletes living with T1D to try to uncover what it is that allows them to excel despite their diabetes. Today on the show, I'm joined by Kate Hall. Kate, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. This whole process for me in starting and running Game Plan T1D has been so much about exploration and trying to find the best and brightest in terms of diabetic athletes. And I was so impressed when I came across your, I believe it was your Instagram profile, and just some of the things that you've been able to accomplish really just blew me away. But for our audience and other people who may not be familiar with you, I wanted to give you the chance to kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Kate. I'm originally from Maine. It's pretty cold, but the summers are really nice. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 10 years old. I'm now 21, and I do track and field. I compete at the Division I level, and I'm a Division I National Champion 2 times, and also the national high school record holder. And now I am a professional track and field athlete. So that's pretty much me.
That's awesome. And so now you said you're a professional. Are you out of the collegiate athletic realm and now into solely competing in track and field?
Yeah, so I'm no longer involved in the NCAA. So I'm in the process now of trying to secure a shoe contract, but I will be jumping professionally, so I'm really excited about that.
That is super exciting. That is so awesome. So I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to go back, obviously, and hear about your diagnosis. From what I understand, you were diagnosed when you're 10 years old?
Yes.
So I wanted to talk about, what was that process like? What was that transition like? And was this prior to your sort of falling in love with track and field, or around the same time? And just what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so it was around the same time that I started track. It was actually a little bit before. But I was really into sports. I was doing soccer. I was doing basketball. But I was always a very positive, happy child, nothing crazy. And then all of a sudden I just started acting kind of weird. I was getting really emotional, crying a lot, which wasn't like me, eating a lot, drinking a lot, and just I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go hang out with my friends, which really was unlike me. So my parents brought me to the doctor, and she was like, "Oh, you're just having a growth spurt because you're drinking and eating a lot." And parents were kind of like, it's kind of weird because, like, I was obviously acting pretty weird. So they brought me to the hospital a couple of days later when I started feeling even worse, and that's when I found out that I was diabetic and gave myself my first ever shot. So since then, it's been an experience, but it's kind of helped motivate me in other aspects of my life, and it's who I am.
And I wanted to get your take. How long do you think that process was where you were kind of not feeling like yourself? Because I've heard ranging accounts of people that, I think their diabetes came on in a day and they went to the doctors right away and they were able to diagnose it in just a few days, but other people live with the symptoms for months before they actually address the diagnosis. But how long was that period for you? And once you did get the diagnosis, what were some of the immediate thoughts and emotions kind of going through your head?
So I think the process was about a week or two. It was so long ago now that I don't completely remember, but I'm sure it was within a couple of weeks. All I remember is playing outside with my friend, and I had to keep coming inside to get drinks because I was just so thirsty. So I kept coming inside over and over, and my parents were like, "What's going on? Like, you never drink this much." So that's kind of the first thing that I noticed, and then it just kind of kept getting worse the next couple of weeks, and that's when we went to the doctor and found out. When I was diagnosed, though, it was somewhat of a shock that I had this disease and that I was going to be giving shots for the rest of my life. But at the same time, like, I wasn't scared. I was pretty positive about it, and my mom was laying in my hospital bed with me, and she was really upset. She was crying, and I'm like, "Why are you crying? Everything's going to be fine." And I think the only thing I was really kind of scared of was I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to play sports.
Yeah.
And once I realized that I was going to be able to and it wasn't going to stop me, then I was okay.
It's pretty wise for a 10-year-old to be able to console her mom in a moment of after a diagnosis, but it definitely sounds like you adapted to the situation and took on a positive mindset right away.
Yeah, for sure.
So pivoting back to track and field, you take the diagnosis in stride. Obviously, as you mentioned, and as we'll get into, you have some serious accomplishments, not only at the high school level, but at the collegiate level and going forward. Being an aspiring Olympian and a professional athlete, obviously had major success. But when did this all start to sort of manifest? At a young age, were people able to see, wow, Kate, you're a step ahead of everyone? And when and how did that sort of all start to manifest?
Yeah, I was pretty young. I was always athletic as a young child, but it wasn't until I would say my sophomore year of high school where I was becoming pretty good on a national level, and that's when I realized that I wanted to jump in college and I wanted to pursue a career and hopefully make the Olympics someday. My marks were getting much better in the long jump, and I had gone to the national meets and scored in high school, and in my senior year I ended up winning and setting the national record. So I just kept working hard, and I really attribute that to my diabetes because from a very young age I had to make all these calculations and give these shots. So my work ethic really started then when I was 10.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you were also nationally ranked as a sprinter as well, in addition to the long jump?
Yes.
So what was that process like, being able to not only excel in the field events and in jumping, but also on the track as well?
Yeah, so I always did both the long jump and the sprints. And it wasn't until I'd say my senior year of high school where I noticed that if I was going to be really good, it was going to be in the long jump. But I love sprinting as well. And it's good to do sprinting because then you're not always focused on just one event. But I kept getting better and better in sprinting, and even the past year I got better and was All-American at the NCAA meet. So my goal is to keep getting better and hopefully make the Olympic trials for that as well.
So I wanted to ask, obviously two-time national high school champion, certainly the culmination of a lot of work during that high school period. What were those competitions like, and what do you recall from those competitions?
Yeah, so in high school, all the meets were pretty low-key. There wasn't like a huge crowd there. It wasn't anything super exciting until the bigger meets. But when I got to the collegiate level, it was completely different. I'd go to a meet and the stands would be full, and especially in Oregon, where the nationals usually are, there'd be at least 20,000 people at the stand. So my first time ever competing there, which was the Olympic trials 2 years ago, it was pretty overwhelming because I wasn't used to that, and everyone's watching you and cheering you on.
Mm-hmm.
But when I kind of got used to that environment, it actually helped me and helped push me, and it's very exciting and motivating to be in such a cool environment where other people are very excited about the sport.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I mean, I did track in high school, but by no means was anywhere in the same ballpark as you. My background is in purview is football. But what is it like as an athlete to do so much training and put in so much effort and then have, when it gets to the stage of competition, all of your effort comes down to one or two or three or however many it is jumps? It's a very small sample size to kind of display your ability. How do you make sure that you're executing and performing at a high level for that one jump?
Yeah, so for track, it's definitely all about the training, because obviously in other sports like basketball, baseball, there's so many games, but with track, it's really just like 5 meets a season, which is not many at all. So it really just comes down to being consistent in training and doing like full approach jumps in practice and pretending you're at a meet. And then if you're consistent in practice and feeling good, then usually that's kind of an indicator that you're going to be doing well at meets.
I recall from my days in high school track, the timing of events was very punctual, and a lot of people seem to have different routines. Obviously, with being a diabetic, there's sort of an added layer there. Do you kind of have a pre-jump routine that you go through pretty regularly?
So my warm-up is always very consistent. I'm usually doing the same warm-ups even during practice. When I go to a meet, it might be a little bit longer. I might do a couple of activation things just to get my body a little bit more ready. But when it comes to like being on the runway or getting into the blocks, I always have the same kind of routine, and it helps relax me and gets me ready. And I think it's really helpful and important.
And how does diabetes factor into that? Are you checking, multiple times leading up to the jump? How does that all play into the situation?
That's the other thing. So we get like a schedule of events, obviously. So I'm kind of planning out my meals throughout the day, and I'm trying to eat 3 hours before competition so that my blood sugars are stable at that point. And then I'm checking every 30 minutes once I get to the track, and then I'm looking at my CGM to see what that is. So it's definitely a process, but I've done it so many times that it's pretty normal now.
Kind of becoming second nature at this point, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So we talked about competing at the high school level. Obviously, you mentioned stepping up to college with 20,000 people in the stands was completely different. How did you handle that transition, and what was it like competing at that higher level?
It definitely was a transition, like I said before. It's very different in high school, especially living in Maine. Track's not super huge, just because it's cold during the outdoor season, or at least the start of the outdoor season.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be hard. But once I started going to the bigger meets, I got more comfortable, and I actually loved it, because then I knew at the big meets I would always have competition, and they're always going to push me to become better. So that's kind of when I realized, I want to always be at big meets like this. And if I want to be at big meets like this, I need to get better and go to school Division I and exceed. So.
And what was the emotion of winning not once but twice at the NCAA level? How gratifying was that? Obviously, you had the success at the high school level, but there's so much added uncertainty when you bump up in competitiveness to that collegiate level. What were some of the emotions that you were feeling after winning not once but twice?
It's pretty hard to explain, but I was just so happy and grateful, because I love the sport, and that's, I think, why I'm so motivated and why I keep getting better, is because I love the sport and I love training. And it had always been a big goal of mine first my big goal was to win on the high school level, the high school national level, and then go into college and win as well. And when I was able to accomplish that, it was just a dream come true, and it was so exciting.
So on that topic of dreams and goal setting, you mentioned the fact that you're an aspiring Olympian.
Yes.
When did that first kind of pop into your head that, this could be a reality and this is something that I want to sort of set my sights on?
So it's actually kind of a funny story. I was only a freshman in high school. The Olympic trials were on TV, so this was in 2012. At that point, I was only jumping 17 feet in the long jump, and these Olympians are jumping 22 feet. So huge gap there. 17 feet is really good for Maine, but not super great on a national level at that age. So when I was watching the trials on TV, I kind of calculated in my mind how much further I need to jump each year to make it to the Olympics and qualify for that standard, I guess. Every year I started getting better, and when I was watching that on TV, I said, I'm going to be in the Olympic trials 4 years from now. So every year I got better, and then I jumped 22.5 my senior year of high school, and that was well above the standard, and I made it, and yeah, it was very exciting and one of my biggest goals.
Wow. And was this a goal that was written down somewhere that you'd kind of look to on a daily basis as you were training? And how was it sort of seeing yourself progress from 17 to 18 to 19 to eventually that 22-foot mark?
Yeah, so I'm in my room right now, and actually, like, on my wall, I have the Olympic standards written from back when I was a freshman in high school. So I still look at that, and I would look at it every single day above my mirror and see that, and that would kind of motivate me to get better. And I had an amazing coach as well, so he really helps me get better every year. Yeah, it was just working hard and making sure that my body feels good, and I was able to do it. So it was really exciting.
So you have the goals set from a track and field standpoint, from an athletic standpoint. Do you also have anywhere written or sort of mental goals with regard to your diabetes? This could be, I want to check at least 8 times a day, or I want to do calibrations to my CGM twice a day, or I want my A1C to be 6.5. Any sort of goal setting with the diabetes that you could kind of relate to your goal setting with track and field?
For sure. My goal is to check like 6 to 8 times a day. I think the biggest thing for me is just making sure that my blood sugars are really good before, during, and after my workouts. I went through, I think, a period like a month ago where my blood sugars were constantly low during my workouts. So I kind of met with my doctor and talked to him about it, and we came up with a plan. The goal was to eliminate those lows because it's obviously affecting my training. So we're kind of just taking things like 1 week at a time and setting new goals as we go.
So you mentioned you're checking. I wanted to ask about the system of management that you use from a technology standpoint. What is the system of management that you use, and how does that sort of empower you to go forward and perform at a high level?
Yeah, so I use Omnipod, and I've been using that for 4 years. I was initially using Medtronic, but it was really hard with track with the tubing, because if you're going to go to a track meet in high school where you could be doing 4 events, you don't have a lot of time to kind of sit around. So I couldn't wear it because it would always fall off while I was running. So that was kind of an issue. So then I got the Omnipod because you don't have to disconnect. It stays right on. It doesn't come off. No tubing. So that's made a huge difference in my training. So it's been great.
And then I noticed no CGM?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do have a CGM?
Yeah, I've been using that for the past, I think, 3 years now, and that's been very convenient because now I don't have to prick my fingers every 30 minutes. I can just look at my meter, and it tells me what my blood sugars are at all times and where they're trending, and causes way less stress. So it's really cool.
Oh, for sure. I think CGMs have to be one of the most important breakthroughs for diabetic treatment, in the last however many years, certainly helping athletes just make sure that they're performing at the highest level possible. You mentioned having some lows during training sessions. I wanted to ask, what do you sort of feel is the most consistent challenge you face as a diabetic athlete?
That's a good question. I think the answer would be just kind of having, so for my training, I'm always training at different times during the day. It could be early morning, it could be afternoon. I found that it can be hard to get my blood sugars to stay at a good level no matter what time of day I'm training. So right now I'm trying to figure out different settings for different times of day while I'm training. So I think that's the hardest thing right now. Like I said, with the lows, I was getting those, I think, mostly before lunch, and I was training a lot before lunch last month. So once we kind of set like a temp basal and then started working out at a different time, those went away. So
yeah, I found temp basals can be, some people are mad scientists when it comes to the amount of temp basals they do and things that they program in, and all of that's really empowered by the technology we have today, and it's fantastic. But on the flip side of insulin and treatment from that standpoint, I wanted to ask about, obviously you're doing a lot of training, and as an athlete, fueling your body is hugely important. I wanted to ask about sort of what is your nutrition plan and what do you use to fuel your body? Obviously, common concern is carbohydrates. As athletes, we need that energy source, but at the same time, they can cause our blood sugars to spike and also drop as well. So what is your system for nutrition?
I actually have celiac disease as well, so that's another thing on my plate that I'm dealing with. But it's good because it kind of helps me stay healthy, and I had that when I got that when I was diagnosed as well. So I've been dealing with that since I was 10. So it was really good to get that at a young age because I've just been living that way for a long time, and it's only getting easier as more products come out that are gluten-free. But I'd have to say, I do eat a lot of carbs because, like you said, your body needs it as energy. But I try to stay away from sugar. Obviously, that's more fast-acting than like a bowl of pasta. So you're not going to get those spikes as much if you have a lot of sugar. So I try to stay away from really sugary things, which includes like Gatorade or Powerade. I try to drink like coconut water instead. And that's what I found helps a lot. But yeah, I do eat a lot of rice, a lot of pasta. I really like Chipotle.
Good call.
Yeah, love Chipotle. I eat a lot of meat too, a lot of chicken. So things like that, mainly a lot of fruits and veggies and seeds and nuts. So
yeah, I think diet, and people talk about exercise all the time, but diet, and if you can really dial in a good low carb, low glycemic index diet, that is one of the most important things you can do for your blood sugar. And on a side note, if Chipotle wants to sponsor this podcast, I would be a huge fan of that. But I wanted to pivot. I was doing some background research before this call, and I read an article that you actually went down to Washington, D.C. and testified before Congress, before the Aging Committee in 2015. What was that experience like, and what was it like to be invited to speak in that setting?
That was amazing. I was actually really nervous because at that point I had only had a little bit of experience speaking in front of a crowd. So I was pretty nervous going up there and speaking in front of Congress, but it went really well. It was one of the best experiences of my life, and I got to meet some pretty cool people and hopefully made a difference. So it was one of the best experiences. And
for our listeners who may not know the context of those discussions, what was sort of that difference in the impact that you guys were trying to achieve by being there and speaking with Congress?
Yeah, so I was really talking about living with diabetes and how it affects not only my life in general, but my training and all of that, and just trying to show them how finding a cure is so important. So just explaining that to Congress and going through that, I think that made a difference. And like I said, it was, if I could do it again, I would, because it was amazing.
Yeah, I think that for the government to hear different perspectives and for the healthcare companies to hear different perspectives from people living with T1D is hugely important. On that topic of advocacy, I wanted to get your take on if there was a piece of advice that you could offer up to someone that was perhaps just diagnosed or someone who's just had diabetes for a while but is going through a rough patch right now. What would be your advice and what would be your message to that person and to that community, and why?
My message would be that it doesn't have to stop you from doing anything. A lot of people are scared that they're not going to be able to do what they want, but that's not the case. As long as you stay positive about it, you can actually turn it into something good, and it can push you in all other aspects of your life to become better, and that's what it did for me. So I think it's really important to get that message across, and also to not be scared to share with others. I know other diabetics that are a little shy about sharing with their friends or whoever else, and you don't need to be, because they're only going to help you and they're only going to look up to you for dealing with this. So
yeah, I think 2 high school national championships and 2 NCAA championships will certainly point to the fact that diabetes does not have to hold you back.
No, it does not.
Yeah, I think the T1D community is just so inspirational.
Yeah.
Go on Instagram, type in T1D Warrior, type in T1D Strong, type in T1D Community, and you will just be blown away by the amount of awesome people out there doing awesome things. But Kate, you talked about transitioning to becoming a professional athlete. We want to know what's next. You talked about a shoe contract. You talked about the Olympics. What should we be looking out for Kate Hall?
Yeah, so what's next is the World Championships next year. So that's kind of what I'm training for right now. And then the ultimate goal is the Olympics in 2020. So right now it's training, getting ready for that, trying to secure a shoe contract, trying to find some sponsors. So that's what's going on right now. But like I said, the ultimate goal will be the Olympics.
Well, with that, we will conclude this episode of the Game Plan T1D Podcast. I know myself and our listeners will be pulling for you, Kate. Wishing you well at the World Championships next year and obviously at the 2020 Olympics as well. Fingers crossed there. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I am Kate Hall. I have type 1 diabetes, and I have a game plan.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Game Plan T1D Podcast. For related content, please visit www.gameplant1d.com or follow us on social media at GamePlanT1D. Find your game plan.